Just hours from now, Secretary of State Tony Blinken will be on his way to a high-stakes visit in Beijing. The U.S. leaving the door open for a face-to-face meeting between Blinken and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Blinken's trip is happening in the wake of several highly charged military-related incidents between the U.S. and China. The most recent was earlier this month in the South China Sea. You see it here, a Chinese warship cutting off a U.S. Navy destroyer. This is an incident that was caught on video as the Chinese ship came dangerously close here, just 150 yards in front of this American ship. Today, Blinken said that he is prepared for, quote, candid conversations. Oren Lieberman is out front.
A high-stakes visit with low expectations. Secretary of State Antony Blinken heads to China, trying to reopen crucial lines of communication with Beijing.
Intense competition requires sustained diplomacy to ensure that competition does not veer into confrontation or conflict. And again, that is what the world expects of both the United States and China.
Blinken's trip was canceled once before after the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon that flew over sensitive U.S. sites in February. Since then, relations have declined with a series of dangerous encounters between two of the most powerful militaries on Earth, ratcheting up the tensions. In late May, a Chinese fighter jet sliced in front of a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft in international airspace over the South China Sea, according to the U.S., forcing the larger, heavier U.S. plane to fly through the wake turbulence of the Chinese jet. Days later in the Taiwan Strait, a Chinese Navy ship cut 150 yards in front of a U.S. destroyer in what the U.S. called an unsafe and unprofessional maneuver. China said the U.S. was there for provocation. Earlier, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin shared a handshake with his Chinese counterpart in Singapore, even as Beijing rejected a formal meeting. Austin emphasized Friday that he's ready for dialogue.
The door is open, and my phone line is open, and so they can pick up the phone and call at any time.
A senior White House official said dialogue is how mature, strong militaries interact, and the stakes are just too high to avoid these critical lines of communication. But at the highest levels of the military, Austin hasn't met with his Chinese counterpart in a year. Blinken is now trying to thaw those frosty relations, as Beijing maintains a deep distrust about Washington's intentions for the region and for China.
The U.S. needs to respect China's core concerns, stop interfering in China's internal affairs, and stop undermining China's sovereignty, security, and development interests in the name of competition.
The State Department said it's not expecting a breakthrough from this visit, just a realistic approach to manage the competition of world powers in a responsible way.
If we want to make sure, as we do, that the competition that we have with China doesn't veer into conflict, the place you start is with communicating.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told lawmakers 1 month ago that the U.S. and the Biden administration were preparing a weapons drawdown for Taiwan to ship quickly in much the same way the U.S. quickly sends weapons to Ukraine. But we haven't heard much about it since then as we await this further announcement. Brianna, it certainly seems possible the U.S. has this on hold right now so it doesn't disrupt or derail this delicate diplomatic process that Blinken will try to advance here when he departs in just a few hours.
Oren Lieberman, thank you for that. Out front now, Democratic Congressman Khanna of California. He is a member of the House Oversight and Armed Services Committees and also the Select Committee on China. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time with us this evening. As you see Secretary Blinken taking this trip, what do the deliverables need to be? Does he need to meet with Xi for this trip to be a success?
Brianna, first of all, it's good that he's going. I would define success as just opening the lines of communication. If we can get military to military contact back, if we can have more regular contact between our Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. I don't think the benchmark should be whether he meets Xi Jinping. If that happens, that's good. But the benchmark should be how do we get communication going between our two countries.
Bill Gates, the billionaire, met with Xi today in China. Xi called him a, quote, good friend. And it's notable because this is a visit that comes just 2 weeks after Elon Musk was in China meeting with top government officials there. Does it concern you that you have people like Gates and Musk, these billionaires who have a better relationship with the Chinese government than U.S. government officials do.
Brianna, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have Bob Iger and Disney, Tim Cook at Apple, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, the NBA commissioner, who frankly have more contact with China than our own military leaders or our own political leaders. And I believe that's why we should applaud Secretary Blinken going there so that we have that dialogue. We had dialogue with the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War, and people should reread President Kennedy's speech at American University where he said we need that dialogue even as we seek to win the Cold War. So there are places we have to stand up to China, but that doesn't preclude dialogue.
As I mentioned, you were on the Armed Services Committee, so I want to ask you about Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, who is blocking more than 250 nominations of generals and admirals because of the Pentagon policy that provides reimbursement for travel and also paid time off for service members and their family members who are stationed in states where abortion is illegal so that they can receive reproductive care. I know you think Tuberville is wrong, and actually Mitch McConnell agrees with you, but does Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin need to engage with Tuberville as he is requesting?
Well, we should not negotiate with Senator Tuberville, who was holding up key promotions for his own ideological agenda. I would never do that. Most Democrats wouldn't do that just to get our way to hold up these promotions. And it matters because one of the promotions being held up is our Joint Chiefs of Staff. And as you know, the General Milley has to retire by October. And if the president doesn't get his pick in place, then we'll have an acting Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that hurts our national security. So I just hope that on this, whatever other maneuvers he wants to do, that's his right, but he shouldn't hold up our military.
Well, it's not held up yet, to be clear, but it
Sure.
will be held up if he continues to do this. And I hear what you're saying, not to negotiate with him. But what other option is there as you have Republicans like Cornyn, like Senator Cornyn, Senator Ernst, who are offering him these legislative alternatives, and he is just rebuffing people even in his own conference? I mean, what else can be done at this point?
Well, I think this is for the leadership of the Republican caucus to figure out. I mean, they have responsibly supported the armed services. I mean, we have disagreements, but when it comes to our national security, when it comes to respecting our military, that's still, fortunately, a place where there's bipartisan agreement. And I hope Senator McConnell and Senator Cornyn will say there are lines you don't cross. And one of those lines is you don't hamper the president from getting the people he needs to keep this country safe, especially when we have threats in China and the threat of Taiwan.
Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.